for me, like distribution of 50 isocenters, I can delete, change any single isocenter. I can even add manually, yeah, individually, if we do see there is a little voxel actually not covered. Our radiation oncologists would always push, in the case of metastasis, please place the little shot there and cover it, so we get 100% coverage. So that's a very different compare when I used to work with Linac or CyberKnife, when it was some parameters could be changed, some parameters could be manually influenced, but mostly it was this communication through those volumes and constraints, especially in the case of CyberKnife. It was a very sort of closed system, so we had to control targets, tuning structures, set up constraints, and run it again, change constraints, change structures, but no way to manually tell the system something. Very difficult sometimes. Of course, once you get used to it, it's working properly and nicely, and definitely you can do beautiful blends on both CyberKnife and Linux-based systems. I can confirm that because I work with them. But so this is just a note about inverse planning. So no questions about planning. Okay. So I am going to the last. I have just few slides, but I will be stopping a little bit in details. So hopefully we'll address. This was actually sent as an abstract and then presented. You can see it, and I left the presentation as it was presented on this European Congress of Medical Physics. Which happened last year in Italy. So we have actually already several years available this new IAEA AAPM document, basically new code of practice for small beams and non-standard beams. I remember when I was leaving United States in like 2010, 2011, that was my last year, we were in fact helping Elekta to measure some of those parameters. And then it took several years, really, years, to publish the final version of this document, and I'm sure there are at least many gamma knives, I would say most gamma knives, which are still not calibrated according to this new protocol. So now you can ask yourself, do I actually, am I using this? If you're using, of course, small beam technology in your department, am I using this novel, the standard? I would call it standard. I would not call it novel. And in fact, in gamma knives, I think actually most centers would answer no. Unfortunately, when I go as a physicist for Elekta and when I do calibration, I'm using some slightly different protocol, which is Elekta ones, and it's not including this TG483 protocol, unfortunately. Don't ask me why. I am just trying to address that still, despite the document is out, that many physicists, centers, organizations still did not apply it. So maybe this lecture at least will lead you to think about it, maybe read it. It's everything inside this document. Also, some people did complain that it's not maybe well organized, but I think you can really find everything in there. I do see problem of small field dosimetry in a couple things. One thing is the detector size. We dealing with the extremely small beams, so detector choice is absolutely the most important thing. So if you are not sure, uh, look in this new protocol, call your colleague, ask questions, please, because especially in the relative dosimetry, when you going to very small beams like in gamma knife 4 mm, if you use wrong detector, for example, I can give you example. If I would use a pinpoint chamber, it's a tiny one, a 16 chamber with very small volume, 0.006 cubic centimeters. So tiny little chamber, I still would end up with the error of like 20%. So you have to be very careful. Really, that's a one big red flag when you, especially measuring those relative dosimetry for very small beams. As it comes to absolute dosimetry, it's important too, and definitely you cannot use the standard chamber, 0.6 cubic centimeters. But if you use proper chamber, for example, in gamma knife, we're using this PTW 31010. But you can use, for example, extra thin chambers with small volume, generally something which is this volume and smaller. I would say don't go below, don't go above this volume, and you should be safe then. Then you should not end up with any significant errors for both relative and absolute dosimetry. So document has actually what we should do, how we should do it, and with what kind of detector we should do it, even with what kind of phantom we should do it. So here you have like list of detectors, suggested chambers for gamma knife absolute calibration, and suggested detectors for relative measurements. You can see that some of them can be used for 16 and 8, but not for 4 mm. So again, be careful. If it's showing no correction factor, you should not use those for the relative measurement of 4 mm. And then to do your measurement is actually, I would say, very straightforward. You, which are gamma knife physicists, you should be familiar with this ABS, plastic spherical phantom. ABS, acetylbutylene styrene, is the plastic which is almost water equivalent, is a very little error if you suppose it is the water. This is the traditional way to calibrate, I would say, but recently, years ago, Elekta designed this dosimetry phantom, which is solid water phantom. I definitely suggest, if you can, to use this phantom. It's a much better phantom. It's much better mimicking patient's fixation. It has a smaller corrections and so on and so on. So generally better, but it's very expensive phantom, unfortunately. Yeah? Unless it comes with your system, it's costly. I think it's something like 50,000 US dollars. Don't quote me. I don't know the current price, but it's a pretty expensive phantom. You can ask your local representative of Elekta, of course. But then it's actually very easy because what this new protocol tried to address is to correct for all those how to say, the parameters which are not fulfilled for the standard calibration. You are used to calibrate in water, 10 by 10 field, typically 10 centimeter depth on Linux, right? But You will never be able to set up such a conditions on CyberKnife, tomotherapy, Gamma Knife, ZapX, and so on and so on. So they tried to create correction factor for your conditions. And this correction factor is correcting for everything, for the detector which you will use, for the phantom which you will use, even for the system which you will use. So here I am measuring, as an example, I am measuring with this chamber. So I find the chamber. I am measuring in solid water phantom. So it's here, solid water, and I am measuring it on perfection. And immediately I get this K factor. And then it's a standard, the step-by-step procedure which you should be familiar. So you have NDW, so calibration in water at cobalt 60, so same energy, and you multiply it by the corrected the signal corrected for temperature, pressure, saturation, polarity coefficient, and then you just, based on this new recommendation, multiply it by this K factor. Similarly, for those relative measurements, like relative output factors, which is denoted by this sigma, it's a ratio of signal. Like signal for 1 minute, for example, measured on 4 millimeter divided by 16, which is the maximum field size on perfection, and 8 millimeter divided by 16. But again, this ratio, which we normally used to use, must be corrected by this correction factor. And again, different detector has a different correction and has a sorry, for the different correction for different collimator size. So you multiply it and then you immediately have the result. So nothing really to be worried about. It's of course big document, but then when you focus on your technology, when you search the tables and when you read it, I think it's should be easy to understand and easy to follow. This is just showing my results. I had to recalibrate when we were upgrading because I knew that my audit will be done by people which are already using new recommendations. So I think in 2019 we changed to and followed this new protocol. And since I have both phantoms, I actually did this. I thought it might be interesting. I did this like 4 different combinations. So the best is of course to do measurement of absolute calibration, so basically dose rate measurement, to do it in solid water phantom and follow this new recommendation. Then do it in solid water phantom and follow the older TRS 398. And then do it at ABS and follow new recommendation, and then do it at ABS and follow old calibration protocol 398. You can see that actually for the absolute dose, it's not as big disaster. I am using a correct chamber PTW 31010 with the volume of 0.125 cubic centimeters. And the difference between those approaches is relatively small. So the change in our treatment planning system to our calibration was relatively small, by like 1.4%. So it's no disaster. It's not like that this new the protocol means that you will have to send letter to like 20,000 patients that you treated till now and tell them that you were actually 15% off. Of course not. Despite we were doing some approximations, they were not as terrible considering you used a correct chamber, but it should be definitely applied. I think we physicists should measure as correct as possible. Recommendation is here, we can use it. So why don't recalibrate your system and make this small tiny change. Significant error can be done if you would do output factor measurement and use wrong detector. Here I also did a little bit exercise. So for 8 and 4, I did measurement in ABS and also use both like the non-corrected for small field and corrected, and the same in solid water. And necessary to say that all data which comes here are measured with a micro diamond detector. If I didn't mention it before, but should be on this like second slide. Excuse me. It is actually showing, I would say, reasonable agreement for all measurements with Electa calculated numbers by Monte Carlo. I should probably mention here what other detectors could be used, or at least which I have a good experience with. Of course, you can try to use stereotactic diodes, which should work properly for measuring such a small output factors. You can use films, but films are a lot of headache. It's a lot of work. You have to follow step by step, sort of very particularly procedure, how you scan films, be careful that they don't get damaged, do subtraction of background, and so on, so on, so on. It's a lot of parameters, but we also did measurement actually on gamma knife with films years ago, and it could be could be used. I'm just trying to emphasize, say that sometimes the hospital will not buy you a new detector, but if you have films, you can measure it with films. Possible. Scintillation detector is the new kind of detector, which is supposed to be the good one. And as far as I know, the MOSFET was also used for measurements. Tiny little like TLD rods or like small alanine dosimeters, I'm not sure. I think this is rather the post-tal dosimetry. So we should use some system which we can probably immediately evaluate in our center. Past TLD and alanine, it's probably very difficult to make such a small chips. So that would be it. Definitely avoid to think about chambers. You will not find a chamber on the market that would be capable to measure probably correctly output factor like for 4 millimeter, unless you would use probably liquid chamber, which was available commercially from PTW years ago, but as far as I know, they stopped production and it's not currently available. So it brings me to the last slide, and it says that I personally would definitely suggest to convert to TRS-483 if you haven't done so, and if you do have technology which is in your center. You should not see big changes in terms of absolute dose calibration, and if you select, if you pick a correct detector, I suppose you should find very good agreement in the case of gamma knife with Electa calculated numbers. It's not just my measurement, but there were several measurements published, presented, independent Monte Carlo calculations. So I definitely want to stress that output factors that we do have now in Lexo Gamma plan are very trustworthy. I would not change them. We really just doing verification for our particular system with those output factors, so I would not touch them. If you're measuring something very different, then I would say your measurement is probably wrong. So be very, very careful if you would be changing output factors at gamma knife. Yeah, in many systems, of course, you typically measure your own factors, but for gamma knife they come as a default, and those measurements proved we are very close and consistent. So we didn't change. We didn't change like 1.5% or less than 1%. We kept Electa numbers, and again, as much as I know, most users following this approach, that they keeping those default values, because it also brings the consistency in the treatment, especially for functional treatments. So this is it from my side. I was speaking almost, well, 1 hour 45 minutes. Sorry for those technical issues at the beginning. If you have any questions now to this very last presentation, or if you have any questions to other presentations, you can ask now.
Okay, thank you very much, Novotny. I have some questions about this TRS 483.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to know that it is only applicable for CyberKnife, Gamma Knife, and tomotherapy, or it is also applicable for Linac based SRS system.
Well, I am not now Linux guy, but as much as I know, you should have those, especially those FF filter
Yeah,
free
triple F. Yeah, triple F Linux.
beams. There should be. Um, I am not sure if for those dynamic treatments like small conformal arc treatments, I don't think that it's ready yet. But for FFF beams, as much as I know, people using it already.
Okay. So, do you have any idea that for the triple F beams, we have to recalibrate the triple F beams with the TRS 483, or is there any recommendation?
I think I think you should follow this new recommendation, but unfortunately, I am not Linux guy now. Yeah,
Okay, okay,
so I was
okay,
not really using this new recommendation for any other technology than for Gamma Knife. Yeah, I did
okay,
commissioning on CyberKnife years ago. I can imagine it's probably easy and very similar like for Gamma Knife to go there, find the table with correction factors based on your detector and use them. But I can't comment really now for Linux based. Yeah,
okay.
sorry for that.
About the Gamma Knife or Cyber Knife, how do you calibrate basically? I just want to understand the procedure. Like our chamber is calibrated against the Cobalt 60 NDW factor. So
Yes.
when you got your chamber, so what's the procedure about the
Yes,
relative
it's the
dosimetry?
same. Yes, yes, it's the same here. In Czech Republic, every 2 years we have to go to calibration laboratory. I get NDW, and then I follow this procedure, which is shown here. So to measure dose rate, you have to use one of those spherical phantoms. So I'm using PTW 31010 chamber, the same electrometer from the PTW Unidos, which is of course calibrated every 2 years as well. And then it's a very standard measurement. You using typically timer, not typically, that's the way it should be done really. Now on Gamma Knife, you set like whatever 20-30 minutes on Gamma Knife beam on time, and then you're using timer of the electrometer. If it's this kind of chamber, 1 minute is fine. If it would be smaller chamber, then maybe you can do measurement for 2 minutes to collect more signal. And then you're using this formula. Yeah, you correct signal for temperature, pressure, and just simply multiply it by NTW and the correction factor from this new recommendation.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
yeah, that's it. Pretty straightforward. Of course, very important part is, but Elekta is now offering you those inserts. Both phantoms are based on, it's like sphere, and here we have a plate which must be exactly drilled for your chamber, so it sits right at the focus where all beams cross fire. And similarly here we have a like cylinder which when you insert, if you insert your chamber, it should sit nicely in the center of, you know, where all beams are focused. But right now you don't need any special machinery shop and try to explain them what you want. Elekta should be able to actually give you both inserts, either plate or this cylindrical insert. And this is of course very important. I didn't mention that, but of course, if your geometry setup would be wrong, then of course you can measure most probably a smaller dose if you would be off from the isocenter, of course. Yeah, so it's a critical but easy to take care of to get the inserts from Elekta, I would say. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, if no questions, I am sending all the best to Pakistan. Good luck with your technologies departments and most importantly with your patients. And thank you for your attention. Thank you for staying almost 2 hours.
Okay, hello, Novotny. I just want to let you know that in Pakistan there are three centers having gamma knife.
Mhm.
Two in Karachi and one is Gumbat in Sindh.
Yeah, I
So
visited two actually.
yeah,
I was in Gambat and
okay,
I was in one center at Karachi. Yeah,
okay,
so out of three, I had a chance to visit two Gamma Knife centers actually.
okay.
Yeah, recently. Yeah, as a
Thank you very
systems
much for
guy.
your time, sir.
Thank you, everybody, and take care and all the best. Thank you. Bye bye.
Just a little quick, just some final comments. I would like everybody to fill out the session evaluation forms, and our next